host of Once Upon a Crime, the true crime channel where we take a deep dive into the stories that make the headlines, bringing you information you won't hear anywhere else. When you're in love, every moment apart feels like an eternity. Most relationships are built on the promise of togetherness, of shared lives and futures. But would you ever consider marrying someone you could never touch, never live with, and never truly have by your side? Today we're exploring love stories that defy all logic. Marriages built behind prison walls. These aren't just tales of long-distance relationships. They're stories of love against impossible odds, where the only certainty is a life apart. In 1996, Lyle and Erik Menendez were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the brutal murders of their parents. Yet behind bars, both brothers found love. Lyle has married twice while incarcerated, and Erik has maintained a marriage for over 25 years. Who are these women who pledge their lives to men destined to remain behind bars? What drives someone to fall in love with, and even marry, a convicted murderer? Is it hope, obsession, or something much deeper? This month, we've been uncovering the mysteries behind women who married the unthinkable in our series, So I Married a Serial Killer. Today, we conclude the series with the story of the most infamous prison husbands of all, the Menendez-brothers. The name Menendez has become infamously tied to a brutal and shocking crime. Two young men, Joseph Lyle Menendez and his brother Eric Galen Menendez, were arrested and convicted of killing their parents, 45-year-old Jose and 47-year-old Kitty Menendez. The brothers would ultimately face two trials. The first one was covered live on a new television channel, Court TV. Cameras were allowed in the courtroom, and commentators discussed each day's proceedings in detail to a rapt audience. The Menendez murders became a media sensation and helped usher in Americans' fascination with true crime. The media quickly capitalized on the public interest in real-life crime, cranking out true crime television as fast as it could. Before this, true crime news was mainly limited to celebrities or serial killers. Infamous crimes that received extensive media coverage prior to the Menendez murders included reporting on serial killers Ted Bundy and John Wayne Gacy, and the murder of John Lennon. Afterward, news outlets realized that even unknowns like the Menendez brothers could draw an audience. The secret sauce to true crime obsession was stories involving scandals, wealth, sex, and murder. The Menendez case included all of these elements. The victim, Jose Menendez, was a Cuban emigre and self-made man. As a result of the Cuban Revolution, he left his home country as a teen. He eventually earned a college scholarship as a competitive swimmer, receiving an accounting degree from Queens College in New York. Hardworking and ambitious, Menendez worked his way up the corporate ladder, first at Hertz Rental Car Company, and then became an executive with RCA Records. There, he was celebrated as a talented dealmaker, signing popular acts such as Duran Duran, the Eurythmics, and the boy band Menudo. In 1960, Menendez married Mary Louise Anderson. Mary Louise, called Kitty, was an aspiring actress attending college in her home state of Illinois when she met Jose Menendez. Kitty was a pretty blonde who competed in beauty pageants. Jose was immediately drawn to her, and before long, he proposed. Kitty, against her family's wishes, wed Jose Menendez when she was 21 and he was only 19. Early in her marriage, Kitty worked as a school teacher, but ended her career after she and Jose started their family. Lyle was born in 1968 and Erik in 1970. By this time, Jose's career was taking off, and Kitty could stay home full-time with her boys. They moved to Princeton, New Jersey, where the boys were enrolled in private schools. In 1986, the family moved to Los Angeles, where Jose was appointed CEO at Live Entertainment, a film studio. The family purchased a home in an exclusive Beverly Hills neighborhood. Previous residents of their new abode included Michael Jackson and Elton John. It was an established fact that Jose Menendez pushed his sons to excellence. Lyle played tennis competitively. His father expected his eldest son to follow in his footsteps and earn a degree in business. Lyle was accepted to Princeton College in New Jersey, but was expelled during his first year for plagiarism. Erik's athletic skills were what earned him praise from his father. Jose expected his younger son to also excel in tennis, his chosen sport. Erik became a nationally ranked player for his age bracket. Before the murders, Erik was already in trouble with the law. To the embarrassment of his parents, he participated in a string of burglaries in their neighborhood in 1988. With his father's money and influence, Erik avoided jail time, but was ordered to attend therapy. His therapist, Dr. Jerome Oziel, would later be instrumental in Erik and Lyle's arrest and conviction for the murders. On August 20th, 1989, 21-year-old Lyle called 911. Between sobs, he told the operator that he and his brother had returned home to find their parents dead. 18-year-old Erik was in front of the house sobbing hysterically when police arrived. They found the bodies of Jose and Kitty Menendez lying in pools of blood in their living room. The couple had been shot multiple times with 15 rounds from a 12-gauge shotgun. Jose's fatal wound had been a shot to the back of the head. Investigators determined that Kitty had tried to crawl away after she was first hit with bullets, before being fatally shot in the face. The investigation would also determine that the gunman had reloaded before delivering the lethal shot. The crime was so brutal that initially, investigators suspected Jose Menendez was the target of a mob hit. As the CEO of an entertainment company, they wondered if he'd gotten into a beef with the wrong people, who'd retaliated with violence. Jose Menendez left an estate worth $14 million. Investigators became suspicious when Lyle and Erik began spending money like it was water. Within 6 months, they'd spent approximately $700,000 of their inheritance. Lyle purchased a Rolex watch, which he flashed at his parents' funeral, a high-end sports car, designer clothing, and invested in a restaurant in New Jersey. Erik paid a $50,000 fee to a personal tennis coach and invested $40,000 in a rock concert that never happened. They both took expensive vacations and were awaiting an additional $5 million from Jose's life insurance policy. Before they could collect, they were arrested. Erik, who apparently possessed more of a guilty conscience than his older brother, was suffering from anxiety and depression after murdering his parents and getting away with it. He began confiding in his therapist, Dr. Oziel. Oziel, going against his ethics training as a therapist, spilled the beans to his mistress, Judalon Smith. Clearly, the doctor had questionable morals in general, but I digress. Later, when Smith and the doctor were experiencing trouble in their relationship, she went to the police with what she knew. She told investigators that her boyfriend had audio recordings of both Lyle and Erik admitting they'd murdered their parents. The tape was turned over to the police, and Lyle and Erik Menendez were arrested on March 8, 1990, 7 months after the murders. Legal wranglings played out for the next 3 years, while the brothers remained in the Los Angeles County Jail. After many arguments for and against whether the information Erik shared with his therapist was admissible in court, the trial finally began in March 1993. Both men faced first-degree murder charges and a possible life sentence. The trial would be unique in that although the state would conduct a single trial for both men, the defendants would have separate juries. Prosecutors stated that the motive for the murders was simple. Lyle and Erik killed their parents for financial gain. But the defense would try to convince the jury that the brothers killed in a desperate act of self-defense. They presented their case, claiming that Lyle and Erik had endured years of psychological, physical, and sexual abuse by their father, Jose. They would both take the stand and emotionally testify that their father had sexually molested them, Lyle from ages 6 to 8, and Erik beginning at age 6 and continuing almost until the day of the murders. Lyle said he'd confronted his father a few days earlier when he learned Jose was still assaulting Erik. His father had threatened him, and Lyle claimed that he took the death threat seriously. As for their mother, she knew about the abuse, the brothers said, but was too weak and dependent on Jose to do anything to stop it. She was also addicted to alcohol and pills, according to her sons. After 6 months of testimony, the jury deadlocked on a verdict, and a mistrial was declared. They could not agree whether the defendants were telling the truth about the abuse, and they split on whether to convict on first-degree murder or voluntary manslaughter. The Los Angeles District Attorney immediately vowed to retry the case. The brothers would remain behind bars until the second trial began, almost 2 years later. Erik and Lyle Menendez were young, attractive, and rich. Almost as soon as they were arrested, they began receiving letters of support from women worldwide. Both of them would begin relationships with women who first became their pen pals. In 1993, when the first trial was being televised, Anna Erickson saw Lyle on her TV and felt compelled to write to him. She noticed early on how public sympathy was largely directed towards Erik, which struck her as unfair. Watching the lawyers thank supporters for their letters to Erik, she found herself wondering, what about Lyle? This led her to write to him a simple but powerful message: hang tough. His reply was just as succinct: thank you. In those 2 words, Anna saw the promise of a possible connection with the confessed double murderer. She envisioned a friendship based on mutual understanding, kindness, and an unspoken promise of loyalty. She continued to watch the trial with these ideals in mind. She wrote him again, and they began a regular correspondence. Anna Erickson was raised in Chicago. Her parents divorced when she was young. By the age of 14, she'd begun a modeling career, traveling to Europe after graduating from high school. When she returned to the States, Anna moved to Colorado and married. She began working as a manager and receptionist for a beauty salon. Her marriage ended, and Anna dated, but those relationships were short-lived. She had a boyfriend when she began corresponding with Lyle, but was frustrated when the man refused to commit. Her pen pal relationship became her primary focus. Lyle Menendez hung on her every word, and his letters were full of compliments, comments, and questions about her and her life. He wanted to know everything about her, and this felt intoxicating to Anna. She felt seen and understood by Lyle in a way she hadn't in her previous relationships. She began craving more of his time and attention. In 1994, when the first jury deadlocked, Anna became intent on getting closer to Lyle. She moved to Los Angeles that year, perhaps searching for something lacking in her life, maybe stability or possibly meaning, after yet another failed relationship. She moved to California to be near him, accepting a position at a record label as a contract administrator. Their first meeting occurred at Los Angeles Men's Central Jail, separated by a glass wall. Anna described their first meeting to People magazine. Quote, "All I can say is that we connected, even though we never touched," end quote. It was an unusual courtship, sustained by letters, phone calls, and brief but meaningful visits. While the world fixated on the Menendez brothers' trial, Anna remained steadfastly by Lyle's side, attending court proceedings and offering unwavering support. By 1995, their bond had deepened to the point of serious commitment. They vowed to marry and even dreamed of starting a family. That was part of the plan, her friend Janet Lombardi later reflected, to give Lyle a child. That word again, give, end quote. It was a love defined by sacrifice and devotion for Erickson. She was willing to give everything to this man who may face a future locked away in prison. Despite their constraints, Anna says Lyle remained attentive and affectionate in small but meaningful ways. One evening while speaking to him on the phone, she stubbed her toe in the darkness and cried out in pain. The next day, she received a nightlight. Quote, "He's just sweet and kind and generous," she shared. She described it as a gesture that exemplified the nature of their relationship. Love expressed through thoughtful details rather than physical closeness. In a world that viewed Lyle Menendez as a cold-blooded killer, Anna Erickson saw something else. She saw a man who cared, listened, and even told her knock-knock jokes to lighten her spirits amid his own legal battles. Their relationship was unconventional, but for Anna, it was real. It was love. The second trial began in October 1995. This time, it would not be televised. Besides prohibiting cameras in the courtroom, Judge Stanley Weisberg also ruled that most of the sexual abuse testimony would be excluded, since the defense had not presented compelling evidence to corroborate the claims. In March 1996, Lyle and Erik Menendez were found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder, and sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. They would spend the rest of their lives behind bars. On July 2nd, Lyle and Anna were married. The ceremony took place over speakerphone. Anna and her groom were not allowed to have in-person visits while he awaited his transfer to a state prison. Lyle and the judge were in a room in the prison, while Anna stated her vows in the office of Menendez defense attorney Leslie Abramson, who served as a witness. Abramson placed the wedding band on Anna's finger. The state of California Department of Corrections prohibits inmates serving life sentences from having conjugal visits. This did not deter Anna. "What's the best sex organ? The brain," she responded to a People magazine reporter in 1996. Lyle, interviewed by Barbara Walters just days before the wedding, called his future wife a saint for wanting to marry him. Although the relationship was limited, Lyle said, it gave him hope behind prison walls. Quote, "The exchange of love and sharing keeps you in touch with your softer side. Otherwise, you can become very hard and cold in here." End quote. After they were sentenced, Lyle and Erik were sent to separate prisons. Erik was incarcerated in Folsom State Prison in Northern California, and Lyle was sent to the Richard J. Donovan Correctional Facility in San Diego. They would not see each other again for more than 20 years. Like his brother, Erik also began a pen-pal relationship with a woman during the first trial. Tammy Saccoman had never been interested in courtroom dramas. Legal proceedings held very little interest for her. She usually tuned them out when they played on television. But in 1993, as she walked past her TV, something made her stop short. Court TV was broadcasting the trial, one among many that filled the headlines at that time. But as she first glanced at the screen, a strange sensation overtook her. Quote, "I know him," she thought as she looked at Erik Menendez sitting in court. It wasn't a memory, she said, not in the traditional sense. She couldn't place where she had seen him before, but the feeling was unmistakable. It was a familiarity, something deeper than recognition. The young man on the stand, his face drawn and eyes downcast, had a quiet sadness that resonated with her. There were pain in his eyes, she said, pain she felt as if it were her own. Tammy was born and raised in Minnesota in a middle-class Catholic family. She was adopted at birth. Her adoptive mother was quiet and caring, but her father was cold and unaffectionate. He was also an alcoholic. Tammy learned to stay out of his way. Her parents divorced when she was 12. Tammy had friends but preferred spending her time in her own imagination. There she felt safe and secure in her fantasy world. Boys were attracted to her, but she was shy. She had her first kiss at 16 and met and fell in love and married her first husband, Jim, when she was still a teen. Their union lasted only 2 years, but they had a daughter together they named Lisa. Soon after her divorce, Tammy met Chuck Saccoman. While she tended to be introverted, Chuck was always the life of the party. He'd been the captain of his high school wrestling team and still possessed an athletic build and seemingly endless energy. He provided excitement in their relationship, while Tammy was the stable, organized helpmate. They seemed like the perfect match and soon married. Chuck invested in properties he would remodel, lease, or sell for homes or businesses. He always had new ideas, and everything he touched turned a profit. Everyone knew and loved Chuck, so he was a successful dealmaker. Tammy was busy keeping up with her husband's energy while raising her young daughter. However, as Lisa grew up and began school, Tammy began to feel lonely and unfulfilled. She'd always loved animals, so she enrolled in a 6-week pet grooming course in New York City. Chuck encouraged her to go. But once in the city, she missed her family. She realized Chuck was fine without her, while she felt lost on her own. She vowed to come home and start a business. She hoped this would earn her respect, love, and attention from her husband that she felt was missing. Once she returned, Chuck expressed his delight that she aspired to start a business. However, she soon realized that this just allowed him to stay away from home longer hours, working on his own projects. Rather than giving her the time and attention she craved, Chuck tried to appease his wife with expensive gifts. This just left Tammy feeling empty. Then she saw Erik Menendez on television. He seemed so lost and lonely in the courtroom. She felt she could relate to him. Tammy didn't know why, but she felt compelled to write to Erik. She knew it was an unusual impulse. He was a stranger, someone whose life had unraveled in front of the world, and yet she couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to hear from her. It wasn't about seeking a response or forging a connection. It was simply something she felt called to do. She sought permission from Chuck, not wanting to reach out to Erik behind his back. With his blessing, she sat down and carefully composed her letter. "I could see the pain in your eyes," she wrote, the words flowing out of her. "I felt so sorry for you." She didn't expect anything in return. Whether Erik responded or not was not the point. It was enough that she had reached out. She had seen his suffering, and in a world that already judged him, she wanted him to know that someone, somewhere, had seen him as more than just a defendant on trial. A month later, she was surprised by a return letter from Erik. He said he was sorry that he hadn't had the time to respond earlier, but his life was, quote, chaotic at the moment. Tammy thought that was an understatement, but got the sense that he was a gentle and thoughtful person. Later, Erik would say that although he received hundreds of letters, when he read Tammy's, quote, "I felt something. I set it aside and wrote her back." They continued their correspondence. Erik said that Tammy's letters helped him escape the stress of the trial. "I enjoyed writing to her," Erik said in an interview. "It was a slow friendship. It was special to me because it was not associated with the trial and the media. Tammy was someone not in the craziness." Erik was busy preparing for the second trial, while Tammy began a career as a professional dog show handler. She traveled for work, and the letters between her and Erik were few and far between. In January 1995, Tammy learned she was pregnant. She was excited and hoped the news would bring her and her husband closer again. Their daughter Talia was born on September 1st. They were both excited about the new baby, but it did not solidify their relationship like she'd hoped. Erik's second trial began a month after Tammy's daughter was born. In 1996, both Erik and Tammy's lives would be changed forever. Erik was sentenced to life in prison in March of 1996. That summer, Tammy learned that her daughter Lisa had been sexually abused by her husband since she was 15 years old. Lisa had begun seeing a psychiatrist for emotional issues and confided in her doctor about the abuse. The doctor contacted Tammy and reported the abuse to the authorities on June 26th. The following day, together, Chuck, Tammy, and Lisa went to the police station where Chuck turned himself in. He was booked on first-degree sexual assault of a minor and released to await his trial. Chuck returned home alone, wrote a suicide note, and shot and killed himself. Tammy was devastated. She focused her time and energy on picking up the pieces of her life and creating stability for her traumatized daughter and 9-month-old baby. Erik didn't hear from Tammy for several months. Then in September 1996, Tammy learned that Erik had been transferred to a Northern California prison to serve his life sentence. She wrote to him, addressing the envelope to Folsom State Prison, and told him about the events that had unfolded in her life. Erik wrote back immediately, offering Tammy his sympathy and comfort. He said he'd wondered if she'd just decided to end their friendship because of his life sentence. He wouldn't have blamed her if she did, he said. Now he realized that her life had also been dealt a terrible blow. They shared their pain and trauma through their renewed correspondence and phone calls. Their friendship took on a more intimate and serious tone, quote, "We grew closer without even trying," Tammy says, as they shared their mutual grief and loneliness. Tammy traveled to California to visit Erik. She was nervous until she saw him. Then, she said, it felt like she was, quote, "meeting an old friend." They continued a platonic friendship for a while, but soon they could no longer deny they were experiencing romantic feelings for one another. It wasn't until almost a year later that Tammy returned to California to visit Erik again. She was surprised at the peaceful feeling that washed over her when she was in his presence. She said she had no intention early on of having a prison romance, calling them weird. Still, she felt compelled to be near Erik. She uprooted her life in Minnesota and moved to California to be closer to him. Tammy began visiting Erik 4 times a week and trading frequent phone calls in between. In 1999, the couple decided to formalize their relationship. They were married on June 12th in a cinder block conference room at Folsom State Prison. Tammy was 37 on her wedding day, and Erik was 28. A few of Erik's family members attended, his grandmother and 2 aunts. After the I-dos, they were allowed to kiss. A Twinkie from the vending machine served as their wedding cake. During each visit, the couple is allowed 1 kiss hello and 1 goodbye. They can hold hands, but any other physical displays of affection are prohibited. Tammy's youngest daughter, Talia, has a relationship with her incarcerated stepfather. She loves Erik, Tammy says. He's very good to her, kind and sweet. Erik and Tammy will celebrate their 26th wedding anniversary this summer. In 2009, Erik and his brother were reunited when Erik was transferred to the Donovan Correctional Facility in San Diego, where Lyle is serving his sentence. Tammy relocated to remain close to her husband. She owns Snooty LaRue Pet Spa in Las Vegas, Nevada. Lyle's marriage to Anna ended after 5 years, when she discovered he was corresponding with other women. In fact, Lyle had been writing to one woman since his first trial. Rebecca Sneed had a 10-year friendship with Lyle through phone calls and letters. She kept a low profile, and not much is known about her reasons for entering into a relationship with a convicted killer. In 1998, she earned a BA in English from a New Jersey university. After meeting Lyle Menendez, she switched her focus to pre-law. In 2008, she graduated from Lincoln University Law School and began practicing law in California. She currently resides in Sacramento. Her law career focuses on advocating for prisoners' rights. She is a successful and respected attorney. In November 2003, 2 years after divorcing Anna, Lyle married Rebecca in the visitor's room of Mule Creek State Prison, where he was incarcerated at the time. He was 35, she was 33. About a dozen friends and family members were allowed to witness the ceremony. Lyle described his relationship with his second wife, Rebecca, as a source of peace and stability. He said her quiet strength in facing a world that often judged him harshly inspired him. Quote, "Our interaction tends to be very free of distractions," Lyle told People in 2017. "We try to talk on the phone every day, sometimes several times a day. My marriage sustains me and is counter to the unpredictable, very stressful environment in here." End quote. Rebecca's loyalty was not without its challenges. Lyle says the world outside had its opinions, judgmental voices questioning her devotion to a man condemned. But she never wavered. Quote, "She puts up with a lot," Lyle acknowledged, deeply aware of the weight his wife carried. "But she has the courage to deal with the obstacles. It would be easier to leave, but I'm profoundly grateful that she doesn't." End quote. Rebecca began a Facebook page to bring supporters of Lyle and Erik together and advocate for their release. Lyle and Erik have not given up hope in their fight for freedom. Their state appeals were exhausted in 1998. Habeas corpus petitions were also denied by the U.S. District Court in 2003 and the U.S. Court of Appeals in 2005. In 2023, the brothers' attorneys filed a habeas corpus petition for a review of new evidence not presented at their original trial. To provide evidence of the alleged sexual abuse, a sworn statement by a former member of the boy band Menudo was submitted. In 1983, when he was 13, Roy Rosello was signed to RCA Records as the newest member of the band Menudo. Jose Menendez was an executive with RCA and was managing the negotiations with the boy band. Rosello states that he was taken to Menendez's home in New Jersey, where he was drugged and raped by Jose. His statement was entered into evidence by Menendez's defense attorneys to bolster the brothers' claims of sexual abuse. In addition, at trial, a Menendez family member testified that he'd received a letter from his cousin in 1988, in which Erik confided about the sexual abuse. In 2018, Erik's cousin found the letter and gave it to the attorneys. On October 3, 2024, Los Angeles District Attorney George Gascon said his office was reviewing the new evidence. Later that month, he petitioned the court to resentence Lyle and Erik, stating, quote, "I don't believe that manslaughter would have been the appropriate charge, given the premeditation that was involved," but added, "I do believe that the brothers were subjected to a tremendous amount of dysfunction in the home and molestation," end quote. The DA stated that he was in support of resentencing the brothers to life with the possibility of parole. If a judge agrees, they would be eligible for parole immediately, given that they were under 26 when the crime was committed. The following month, in November 2024, rumors surfaced that Lyle and Rebecca were divorcing. She announced that she and Lyle had been separated, quote, "for some time." Also in 2024, it was rumored that Lyle was in a relationship with a 21-year-old woman from England named Millie Buxey. The resentencing hearing was initially scheduled to begin on December 11, 2024. However, at a court hearing on November 25th, it was pushed back to January 30th, 2025. As of this writing, the trial has yet to be scheduled, and delays have occurred due to the California wildfires. It remains to be seen whether Lyle and Erik Menendez will be resentenced and perhaps set free. That will do it for this episode of Once Upon a Crime, and will conclude the series, So I Married a Serial Killer. We'd love it if you'd follow or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast player. Follow us on social media for more true crime memes, updates, and chats. We'd love to interact with you. Get all the links at our website, truecrimepodcast.com, or search for Once Upon a Crime Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. We're also on YouTube. Watch documentary-style videos for each of our episodes. Spread the true crime love by liking, commenting, and especially sharing our videos. Thanks. I'll appear at the Beyond the Crime Convention in Albuquerque, New Mexico on March 15th. Get your tickets now for this all-day event that brings together true crime survivors, family members of the missing, detectives, advocates, and true crime content creators who advocate for the voiceless. Go to beyondcrimeconvention.com and use our promo code BEYOND-OUAC to score tickets. And I'll see you there. Once Upon a Crime is written and produced by me, Esther Sanchez Ludlow. My executive producer is Lorena Garcia, and my researcher is Emma Battaglia. Until next time, be good to one another.